Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents. I am Tracy S. Phillips, and today I'm talking with Rachel Howzell Hall. She is the critically acclaimed author of 13 novels. See How They Run is an Audible Originals bestseller. Her book, We Lie Here, was nominated for the Los Angeles Book Prize and is a Wall Street Journal and Amazon Charts bestsellers. Her books have also been nominated for the Anthony, Strand, Barry, Seamus, and International Thriller Awards. And the list goes on. Today, we're here to talk about her latest best-selling thriller, What Fire Brings. Oh, there's the cover. Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. This book was like so amazing. I can't even imagine like some of the difficulty you might have had writing this. And it's going to be really hard to talk about without like giving things away.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But we can.
we
We can.
can.
I'm
Yep.
so glad you invited me on. Thank you for the invitation, Tracy.
Yeah, you're welcome. Um, so let's talk about this the character in this book.
Yeah.
Because when I finished it, I had to go back and read the first chapter just like to see how the clues like all fit together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so Bailey Rose Meadows she's in training to become a licensed investigator.
Right.
I'll let you talk.
So to be a California licensed investigator, you have to have hours, 600 hours, I think it is. And so this is what she thinks is her first case. It's to find her friend and a community activist who searches for lost women or the missing period, um, Sam Morris. And last time Sam was seen was in the wilds of Topanga Canyon, which is in the Santa Monica Mountains here in Los Angeles. And so Bailey goes and poses as a writer at a writer's residency with best-selling thriller author Jack Beckham. But she's actually there to look for Bailey. And to make matters
For
worse,
Sammy, right?
she's looking for Sammy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And to make matters worse, Bailey is looking for Sam at the very start of fire season here in Los Angeles. So that kind of amps up the need to find Sam sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you begin like giving little clues right away in the first chapter. You say some things are unknowable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so right away we sense that something's up with Bailey. And sometimes it's like she's going through the motions, like she's not sure
Yeah.
what she's doing.
Which, we all in life, that happens to everyone. It's that imposter syndrome where you're in a place, and I write about this a lot. You're in a place and you don't know everything, and you hope that by the end of that interaction, you'll have more light. But sometimes you can be in that room or in that relationship or that job for years and years and years, and that sense of not knowing where you are, who you are, and what you should be doing there, it isn't really solved, and you're never really comfortable. So I wanted to take that idea and put it to test again, and like I do in almost all my stories, but in a place that is in Los Angeles, but in a world so different from the city that I grew up in. In many ways, I am Bailey. I knew about Topanga Canyon, but it's in the forest, in the hills, 39 miles away, which I named the book that Bailey is supposedly working on. And it's this whole world with mountain lions and forest fires and mudslides. And you know, you we go up there and we have dinner every so often, and it's so otherworldly. And I remember going up there saying, "Yeah, I don't think it's so pretty here, but I don't think I ever be comfortable there." And that's why I kind of wanted to set it in this place that is of Los Angeles, but totally not, because it's big and wide, and it's the only city on in the United States, I believe, other than, and I want to say the world, this huge urban center where there are mountain lions. So it's like this totally wild place where things happen and people disappear, and there's the threat of fire all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, how can you be comfortable if you're an outsider coming into this kind of untamed, beautiful, beautiful space?
You talked a little bit about that at BoucherCon in your interview with
Yeah,
Jess Lowry about being the outsider.
yeah,
And with Bailey, she's not only an outsider in that environment, she's the place that she's at, the writing retreat with this um fancy writer and all of his whatever.
uh-huh.
I want you to talk about that some. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, uh, this is a writer's residency that he is opening his home to. We've heard about places like this where a writer will host writers to come and work on their stuff, sometimes even co-write with them. And, he wants to tap into her. She's an African American woman. So he wants to tap into her being a Black woman so that his fiction can become more authentic, and he can write authentic characters and what it is to be a woman, because he's been told by his fans so much that he writes women well. And we know writers like that. And so here he is tapping into this person who isn't even in some ways real. And I just find that fascinating that he's being kind of like this vampire sucking from a cipher. It's
Yeah.
a strange dynamic. And women especially, we experience that a lot, where someone is trying to take something very precious and interesting about you to their benefit, no matter what their intentions are. It is still kind of intrusive and strange, and you don't know how to deal with it. And so here Bailey is pretending to be someone that she's not, to write a book about a life she doesn't have. So it was very, very layered, this story and these characters, because
Yeah.
Jack too, he isn't who we all think he is. He isn't who he thinks he is, and Bailey certainly doesn't think he is who she thinks she is. Yeah, so everyone's playing this part in a story, and
Yeah.
no one's being truly authentic, except they're authentic in their inauthenticity.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a hard book to write. And as I
Yeah.
mentioned, in BoucherCon, I was kind of going through the motions too, because I was dealing with a lot of grief and pretending that I was fine, but I wasn't fine. But what is
Mhm.
fine?
Right.
It was a growing experience for me.
Yeah. No, and while you're grieving, it's hard to write. I've been there too. And
Yeah,
there's something about that space, like you want to go into your fiction because it's a lot more comfortable than what's going on in,
yeah.
your world.
There's that sense of control.
Yeah. But it's also really hard
Yeah,
to focus. And
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And this book was especially because there are so many tiny, intricate parts. It was hard to focus and hard to keep my place because of the exact thing I was writing about. And so it was a study in myself, in a way,
Yeah.
that writers, we mine our lives for a lot. And I was certainly mining my real life and my losses to help bring this story and make it even more true than and authentic than what it would have been.
Oh, and it's so good. You did such a great
Thank
job.
you.
Um,
Thank you.
did you have an inspiration for the character? Yeah.
Yes, other than personal, there was that, of course. Writers we're always turning to ourselves, like I said. But there were three things that inspired the story. There were three
Inspiration.
inspirations for this book. Three inspirations for this book. The first was Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. When I
Ooh,
read that the first time, it I won't spoil it for those who haven't read it, but it was one of those stories where you're going back, and it's like, did he set this up properly? And he did, and I loved it. It's like I want to do this story. I want to do a story like this. And then when I saw the movie Memento, once again, a story that's kind of out of order and about memory and loss. And it's like, I had to go back and watch this again. And then the third story was a true story about a young woman, a kindergarten teacher, who taught in schools in St. Lucia. I want to say St. Lucia or St. Thomas. And that island, like the other small islands, the Virgin Islands, was struck by a hurricane, and no one could find her. Her family went over looking for her. She was missing. She was gone. No one knew where she was until some time passed, and people pulled this young woman who had been floating in the New York harbor. And it was this woman who had been a kindergarten teacher in St. Lucia, and she didn't remember how she got to New York. No one knew what happened between the hurricane and her being pulled out of the harbor.
Yeah. I actually
And
think I've heard
it
that
was an art.
story somewhere too.
Yeah, it was a New York magazine, I remember. And they figured it was something called a dissociative fugue, which is where basically, you know how when you go into a room and you're like, why did I come in here? Or you're driving and you miss your exit because you were like blanked out. That is a form of dissociative fugue, and it can't be seen on an MRI or CAT scan. Basically, psychologists just take your word for it. And that's what they figured, what happened, that it comes on because of trauma or stress, anxiety. And so they're like, okay, this is what happened. She had some stress during the hurricane and she blacked out. Well, she's gone again to this day, unless it just happened recently. They don't know where she is. They have her on camera at a bus depot. I think it was a bus depot, and she's sitting there on a bench, and her carriage changes, like her posture changes, and she looks up, and then she like wanders off screen, and that's it. They don't know where she is. And I found that fascinating and horrifying, because where is she now? What is happening? What is that?
Right.
So after reading that story and storing it in my head and thinking about it, I decided, you know, that is the story I want to write. And at the same time, we were going through all these forest fires. People probably saw the picture of the 405 freeway flanked by fire about 2 years or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and all of it came together. So those are the inspirations behind what fire brings.
Yeah. I want to go back and talk about the dissociative fugues, because in a way, is that is that what we used to call um, like split personality disorder?
They did call it that, but now with all the different divisions in mental disorders, they have separated that from split personality. With all the knowledge and the learnings about the brain and everything, the smart people have separated dissociative fugues from, you know, the split personalities and schizophrenia and all those. This tends to be, they believe, more stress related than anything that's biological. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so this arises, they say, from unaddressed trauma, in a way of dealing with PTSD in some ways.
Okay. So
And
the
that was
brain
the
just kind
interest.
of like shuts down in a way and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
keeps
yeah,
going, but maybe you forget everything.
right. And your brain's like, I need to tap out, which we do all the time. And
Right.
we do it either by just, some of us eat to make it feel better. Or some of us, I don't remember having that conversation. I mean, we've
Yeah.
all done that. It's like, I don't
Or
remember
just
that.
space out for a while or whatever, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah. And you just kind of wander and walk and walk and walk until you look up and it's like, oh, I guess I need to go back to that life that I've tried to forget all this time. And that was the interesting thing about the parents of the woman who has disappeared. They're like, well, there's nothing wrong with her. She has no trauma. Our family's fine. And, you know, is everyone's family fine? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
mm,
what do you consider fine?
right. And would a parent know everything that's going on in their daughter's life?
Doubtful.
What if something happened to her that she doesn't want you to know about? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. And she has
exactly.
no one to talk to. I mean, the automatic thing is to turn on yourself and to protect yourself somehow. And if that means forgetting your life at that moment, that's what you'll do.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that what
interesting.
happened with Agatha Christie when she says she like kind of left her life for those few days after her husband was found out, as she found out her husband was cheating on her or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And another like layer to this book is that Bailey finds out that Jack's wife is also missing,
hmm
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And she's been gone for like 6 years.
Yeah.
He's apparently heartbroken over it.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
we get to know Jack, we're also a little bit like,
Mm. Yeah, no, that part was fun because, you know, we all write about trauma. And I think men who have experienced a lot of loss, they get a lot of attention and love. And we read about them in, novels all the time. They're these tragic men who play jazz and drink whiskey and think about their dead wives or their dead daughters or something. And you know, I think that's why I gave him that because it is such a stereotype that I wanted to kind of make that a bit more dangerous than what, yeah, yeah. Women let their guards down some when we feel sorry for them, like the injured dog that we want to take home and heal. And as we know, sometimes injured dogs are the most dangerous.
yep, they can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and another layer. Oh my gosh. But this was, you add in like details from the investigative notes
Mhm.
and like evidence sheets, things that they've
Yeah,
found. I love that.
thank
That's
you.
like a little bit like off the beaten trail too for mystery books or thriller books. Um, how would you like, what would you say to authors who are trying to, I don't know, maybe break out of the mold?
I would just go for it. I mean, I remember seeing that device the very first time, maybe years and years ago, maybe I would say almost 20 years ago. I read In the Lake of the Woods by Tim, oh, I can't remember his name. Um, but he used it and I loved it. And it's like every time I get a chance to use that type of setup, I will do it. Because especially now that we love true crime and we're fascinated with podcasts and all the rest of it, it breaks away from authors having to explain everything. And
Yeah.
so here it is. Here's the transcript. Here is the 911 call. Here is the article. It just, I think, makes it more fun thing for both the writer and the reader to actually feel like this is a real thing.
Yeah.
I have a whole big file of transcripts from court cases and newspaper clippings just so that I get it right. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a bit morbid, but that's what we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
no, and but that's why it's so interesting. I think that's why true crime is so popular because
Yeah,
yeah, especially like the unsolved ones. I love those.
yeah. No, and I go to web sleuths, which is where those folks hang out, the people who helped solve the Golden State Killer. They were on web sleuths. Don't fuck with cats. That those people, they're on web sleuths. So it's a great resource for the very, very beginnings of a crime to the end where folks are sentenced. So anybody listening out there looking for a place to click around and get transcripts and whole files, PDFs of case documents, that is a great website to look at.
What's the website again?
Web Sleuth,
Web
SLEUTHS,
Okay,
websleuth.com. Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. We should check that out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and also your fire details were so visceral. And I imagine living in LA, you've probably had some experiences.
Not face to face with those types of fires because I live in the hard city with the
Yeah.
concrete and everything. But yes, you can see, especially that fire, because this fire is that Topanga Palisades fire from 2021, I believe it is. Your whole life changes, even if you are not in the woods. Because again, Topanga is only 39 miles. And for LA, that's not a lot. The air changes, the air quality changes.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, you can't, one, you don't wash your car. You stock up on allergy meds and eye drops. You don't go outside. It's pretty bad. Sometimes your coworkers don't come in because they're either evacuating. I worked and write for a huge medical center out here in Los Angeles, and we actually have emergency disaster fund for
Mhm.
employees because if it's not on fire, then it's flooding, and our employees live in all these places, and sometimes you lose everything. So
Wow.
yeah, even though it's not a firsthand, thank goodness, my house is about to burn down type of experience. But yeah, your life changes. It's one of those reasons why we have such lovely sunsets out here between the smog and the fires. Uh,
Right.
all that crap in the sky just yeah, it
Yeah.
just fits because we are in a basin.
Yeah. And one of the details in the book sort of made it all like hit home for me too. They were talking about watering the roof.
Yeah, yeah, that is one thing that people water their roofs. They have to clear their brush, and those are like huge estates up there in Topanga Canyon and steep hillsides. And you're responsible for your own kind of your property. The state and the city and county will help, but that's all on you. And if you have a neighbor who wants a lot of privacy, bushes and trees provide that privacy, but it also feeds fire. And yeah, between May and I would say this month, you're in danger. And fire season wasn't as bad this year because of all the rain we did have. Uh, but then we dealt with mudslides. And
Yeah.
sometime I want to say this summer when we had like weird rain, Topanga Canyon was cut off from the rest of the world because of the mudslides.
Oh,
There
wow.
is basically one way in and one way out of that place, and that's not a lot of
Yeah.
that's not a lot of road for me to feel comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. No escape, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely beautiful up there. Not that I get to see it much when I drive up there. I'm like focused on the road because it's twisty and turny, and I don't want to like fly off into a canyon somewhere. So yeah,
Right.
but it's gorgeous.
Which is almost how the book starts.
Yeah, yeah. No, I pour all my anxiety about driving those roads into that first chapter
Yeah.
because that was me when I first went. It's like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. Oh my God. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that.
It is very easy, especially if if you don't know to go um, over a cliff,
Yeah.
especially when there are like other cars behind you that know this road and they
Yeah.
want you to go faster and you're not sure what to do because
Yeah.
you can't, there's not enough road to kind of like pull to the side. Oh, it's way too stressful. It's way
Yeah.
too stressful. I'd be Instacarting
Stressful.
my groceries all the time if I lived up there.
Um, Towards the end of the book, there's quite a few twists, which I will not give away. But I was wondering too, then, are you plotting that out? Are you pantsing it?
No, I am a plotter. And especially as I was writing this book with everything in my life going on, I needed that outline more than ever. But I do allow inspiration to lead me off into the canyons, only because I feel safe. I have this outline to come back to if I
Mhm.
get lost. But yeah, I especially I use note cards, index cards. I save the cat, or typical kind of word outline, post-it notes everywhere because there were a lot of switchbacks and look backs and new discoveries. Well, not necessarily new discoveries because I had planted them,
Right,
way back, but making sure that that connected to that.
right.
Yeah, it was like the red lines and the red string
Yeah.
all over the place. It was fun, but it took a lot of brain power, and that kind of landed in the wrong time in my life. It was the first time that I missed a deadline in my writing career. I had never, and since then I've never missed a deadline. But um, just so much had been going on that I was just sitting and I was writing, but none of it was making sense.
Yeah.
And that was a weird thing for me. It's like, here I am, actually, I'm functioning,
Mhm.
but it's all just kind of this fluff that when I read back on it, it's like, what is that? Who are these people? What name is that? That's not even a name in a book. But it was just my mind, just so it was exhausted and it was in mourning and just going through the motions kept me sane. It didn't have to make sense, but it kept me in place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it
yeah.
comes all together, that's for sure.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I mean, I also recently finished What Never Happened.
Ooh,
And when I tell my friends about that book, I compare it to Tana French. I'm like, if you like Tana French, you're
which
gonna love.
is thank you. That is such a compliment because she's one of when I started on this mystery journey, she was one of the first writers I read, and I absolutely love her. I
Yeah,
absolutely, and thank you. That is such a compliment. And that was a
sure.
fun book to write because out here, especially in Los Angeles, that going to Catalina Island, which is where What Never Happened takes place, it's one of those field trips that LA kids go on. You get on the ferry, you ride the 26 miles over, and you get ice cream and look at the bison and do all these cool things, and you come back and you're like, that was a cool place. But there's this whole weird thing about Catalina Island with its labor, with its land, why those bison are there. It's a wonderfully fake place.
Mm.
Um, and I wanted to write about it, and I wanted to write about it at the height of COVID, right when COVID shut everything down. Because I
Yeah,
wanted to talk about isolation for the character Coco, psychologically. But then here she is on this island trying to figure out, you know, who killed her family, the family that was supposed to live in the house that she now lives in. So that was fun because, again, it was a story within a story.
and
And
that's interesting too, because you bring that up about writing about COVID, and
uh-huh.
that theme drops in a little bit in What the Fire Brings.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's not like and all the publishers are telling people, don't write about COVID. We don't want to hear, nobody wants to
Yeah.
hear about that anymore, right? We all lived it.
Yeah.
But I think you drop it in such a way that it's like, oh, reality check. Yes,
Yeah.
that really happened.
It really happened and it affected everything we did and still do. I mean, you
Yeah,
remember reading about women turning up dead and their husbands are like, oh, well, she's dead because she had COVID and he strangled her or drowned her and
right.
used the guise of illness to cover for it. Kids being stuck at home with their abusers. It was a
Yeah.
horrible time for women and children, especially.
Yeah.
And for those of us who were in normal lives, it was still very isolating and wonderfully quiet and sometimes, but there was this constant threat of, is this a
Yeah.
cold or is this something worse? am I going to have a job, or I miss my
Right.
family, or all those weird things. And so I wanted to weave it in as yet one more environmental kind of force that makes people act the way they do, makes people have thoughts that they wouldn't otherwise have, make them
Right.
deal with weird silence that a regular kind of busy life would keep them from experiencing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we're all still affected by it. I think
Yeah,
we're still seeing the aftermath of that
yeah.
time because I mean, I notice it all the time. I teach piano, so I'm, seeing
Ah,
kids and stuff, and
uh-huh.
and it's just, little things in people's behavior that are different now
Yeah.
than they were 5 years ago.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And I work in a medical center, so I see it all the time. Um, but I know when I go to large spaces and someone sneezes, everybody kind of looks at that person like, why aren't you covering your mouth? And you need to go wash your hands. We're very much aware of habits, bad habits, especially, and what we expect now from each other in terms of hygiene, basic things like washing your hands and you know
You wear a
not
mask.
wearing mask and not touching everything. Oh my
Right.
gosh, yeah, yeah. Ah,
Yeah. So you have a new book coming out. Is it, when's the release date?
December 3rd. It's called The Last One,
The
and
last
it's the
one.
first in my series of romanticides. I know, romanticy. Uh, and I'm very excited
So romantic
about it.
fantasy, right?
Yeah, of which
So
I wrote neither.
that
But
fantasy is all that world building and
yeah, and that was difficult for me. I mean, we build world in crime and mystery, but our world is hard. There are laws, I mean, down to the code, and we obey them or we don't. And if you don't, we know what the consequences of those are, right? Fantasy, I had to create, this entire new world, and I did, or so I thought I did, but I didn't go deep enough, and it was quite the learning experience. And again, I was doing all this the same time as I'm writing, what fire brings. So whatever was going on with me with that book, the same is happening with this, romanticy, and I'm learning to write this genre from scratch. There are no Trump novels of me trying to do this before. Um, it was difficult, and I loved it. I mean, it was painful sometimes, but I loved it. I'm working on the second one now, and I'm so excited about it. And part of one reason I'm excited about it is like I know how to do it better than I did
now
that
you've
first
built the
time.
world, right? So if it's
Yeah,
book two, then you have the world is already in place now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's got to be
But
easier.
yeah, I am excited about it, and it's better because the December 3rd book is going to be my first book, and is it going to be perfect? No, but is anyone's first debut novel perfect? I don't even read my novels ever again after I stop talking about them. I'm sure you're like us, like yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
going to read
yeah.
that again. I'm done. I'm done because there's always something you can fix, always something that is awkward and not worded well, and you don't want to revisit that because it hurts. And so it'll be the same with my romanticides, where it's like, this is great. I'm not going to read this ever again, except unless I have to. And that's for, continuity and, what color were his eyes in book one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really exciting. And I come into it, again about a woman who this one, she wakes up in a forest outside this town, and she doesn't remember who she is and why she's there, but she knows she has to get to this place atop a big mountain to save the world. And that's basically the thrust of the last one. And it's not dissimilar from my books about a woman being in a place where she's not supposed to be. So I bring a lot of my crime writing, mystery writing sensibilities into the story.
Yeah. And with 13 books, you have loads of experience. So I can't wait to read that one too.
Yay, I can't wait for
Yeah.
you to read it.
Yeah. So where can readers find your books and where can they look for your say the name of the romantasy again?
The last one
The last one.
that comes out December 3rd. It can be pre-ordered now from any bookstore that you want, and it'll be in mostly every bookstore you go into. It's a big book. It is a big book, the biggest in terms of print run for me than any of my mysteries. So you can find it anywhere you want. What Fire brings, available mostly online. There are a few random bookstores that have it, but get it from your favorite website for your books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And what's your website if
I
anybody wants to reach
am,
out?
yes, www.rachelhowzell.com. Reach out, say hey. I'm also on Twitter. I'm never going to call it X because his
Yeah.
mama name it Twitter. I'm going to name it Twitter. And I'm at Rachel Howzell, and that's where I am the most.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Tracy. It's great talking.
Yeah.